Okay, today on the show, we have Melinda Jakovich-Lagrange from Compass. Now, Melinda has 26 years of experience working with high-end buyers and sellers in Chicago's most upscale neighborhoods. Melinda has consistently been a top 1% producer in the Chicago area. Prior to a real estate career, Melinda graduated from Northwestern University and worked in the financial service industry. Now, Melinda gives back to Chicago's cultural and nonprofit organizations. She has served and serving on the women's board of the Joffrey Ballet, is also on the Ronald McDonald House Auxiliary Board. She is co-chair of Forward Momentum and is a founding committee member helping children in Inglewood. And that is about 1/100th of all her accomplishments. But we are so thrilled to have Melinda on the show. Please visit her website, which is Melinda Jakovich, Jakovich.com for more information about Melinda and what she offers her clients. And we found out just as we were chatting before we started the show that Melinda's husband, who is a very prominent architect here in Chicago, actually designed the building I live in, which is what an amazing coincidence. But anyway, Melinda, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, DJ.
We are so thrilled to have you. You have such an impressive history, and you've already told me about 10 different stories before we even started the podcast. But I would like to go all the way back to the beginning, if you don't mind, and tell us about how you got into real estate coming from the financial services industry.
Well, actually, when I was in the financial industry, I sold tax shelters, and I worked for a company that developed presidential towers.
Sure.
And I am in my husband's office right now, and I am looking at presidential towers. So it's kind of ironic because that was unheard of.
Yeah.
I would have the opportunity to talk to people like Dan Rosenkowski, Clement Stone, and I was 20 years old or 21 years old at the time. So there was nothing. I mean, that was Skid Row. So people in those days, the taxes were 70%. So people used to look for any way not to pay their income taxes.
Sure.
And make it in investments, and it happened to be always in real estate. So I actually fell, and I used to trade at Morgan Stanley at the time, and I fell and I needed back surgery, and I just could not sit at the screens for 12 hours a day, which is what was kind of required
Sure.
of you in those days. And I took my real estate license. And I decided I've always liked real estate. It's kind of like the wild, wild west to me. I realized you didn't have the jurisdictions monitoring you as you did in the securities business.
Right.
And there were a lot of like entrepreneurs, and just I thought it was always fascinating. And I took my license, and I met a woman who still to this day I talk to. And I talked to my two mentors in this real estate. They were trailblazers, and that's Annetta Gray and Elaine Waxman. And I'm forever grateful. They really showed me, because in the securities business, there weren't very many women. There was still a lot of glass ceilings.
Yeah.
But in real estate, I noticed that women were really thriving as well as thriving, surviving. And the opportunities in real estate just were unlimited. And I just fell in love with it day one.
Wow. And so 26 years ago, you decided to pursue, did you just immediately go full-time, or did you try to sort of do both, or?
You know, when I was at Morgan Stanley, I worked on the #1 team. It was equities. It was the day of IPOs.
Sure.
And the head broker said, if you know your shit, no one can intimidate you.
Yeah, it's true.
So, and you can't do that part-time. And I worked for a company called Can. And my mentor actually started Rubloff,
Sure.
Annetta Gray.
Yeah.
And you had to wear a suit. I mean, she had certain things that were required of you. You had to spend so many hours on Tuesdays learning the properties, and there were no part-time agents.
Sure.
The fact that she hired me and I was brand new was kind of an anomaly in itself. But no, I still think you can't do real estate part-time. It's just, if you really want to service your clients properly, it's a full-time job. It's a way of life, actually. I mean, it becomes more than, it's not a 9-to-5er.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. We get a lot of questions to our podcast or the firm even that I work at, where people ask, do you accept part-time agents? And it's like, well, you can always find a firm that will accept a part-time agent. But the question is, how much knowledge and are you going to be able to provide your clients, how, are you going to be able to be successful that way? And it's really hard if you're part-time.
Right. And I remember Annetta Gray saying to us all, because there was about 3 of us that were new, and she would said, if you are not making, and at that day, 24, if you aren't making $40,000 a year, and that was 1994,
Mm-hmm.
get a real job and get a life. Because we work at nights, we work weekends, and so that this might not be the field for you. You can give yourself maybe 1 year to make less, but other than that, she said, why do you want to do it?
Yeah. It really becomes, you almost have to be obsessed with it, in a healthy way. But I think you have
Right.
to, we were talking, Melinda lives actually very close to where I live. Her husband obviously has designed buildings in our neighborhood. And she's a resident as well in our neighborhood. And we were talking about just various things that we share in common. She and I go to the same 7-Eleven, and we were just joking around about some things.
Erie Cafe.
Erie Cafe is
Yeah.
in fact, a person who works in our office, his wife's family owns that Erie Cafe, or owns our Erie Cafe. And so we talk a lot. We end up talking a lot about the Erie Cafe in my office. But for those not from Chicago listening, this is a famous Italian steakhouse, old sort of same family or somehow related to the family that was also Gene and Giorgetti's, another famous Chicago steakhouse, Italian steakhouse. But anyway, we had on Matt Laracy, who has an office just down the street on Erie, as you know, and he was on the show, and he said for the first 5 years of his career, he didn't focus on sales. He only did, I think, 10 sales in his first 5 years, but he would just wake up every day, put a suit on, and you've probably seen him walking around the neighborhood. He's always in a suit.
In a suit, yeah.
Always in his same blue suit. But he spent those times walking from building to building from 8 to 5 and saying, is this a condo building? Is this an apartment building? And just learning his craft. And he would do that full time, and he did that for 5 years. And then he finally felt like he knew enough to actually go out and service clients in our area. And I thought, boy, I really haven't heard that story before, but it makes a lot of sense. So few agents, are putting in that sort of time and energy to really learn the craft, and the ones that do become like yourself have become obviously extraordinarily successful. And
I have nothing but respect for Matt.
yeah.
And that's what I think we all have to be a little kinder and respect each other, because I need the other brokerage community as much as I need the one-time transaction. And I see him walking there. And I remember my first day, Annetta Gray called me. She said, Melinda, let's sit down. They were just getting rid of the books. We were going on the computer.
Sure.
And I said, Annette, I have appointments. She goes, how did you know how to do that? And I sold something my first week. But
You're
that's
kidding.
but that that's lucky. But I would be at the office at 6 to 10 almost every Monday through Friday.
Wow. Yeah,
But
that's what it takes.
yeah, it does. It's like the outliners, right? Outliers. Yeah. I say outliners. You have to 10,000 hours. Really, you have to dedicate the time to be considered to be master your profession. And I don't think you can fake it. So they say fake it to make it, not in real estate.
I have never understood that. The 10,000 hours, Malcolm Gladwell, brilliant, smart, makes perfect sense. The fake it till you make it, I've never really understood, because I think people deserve authenticity. They deserve the truth. And if you're not able to effectively service a client, now I'm not saying you, of course, I'm saying anyone listening, you probably shouldn't take on that client. Obviously, Melinda can effectively service clients because, she's put in her 10,000 hours. But there's a lot of people listening who might get a listing in an area that they're not familiar with, or maybe it's somebody wants to purchase a home in an area they're not familiar with. And then the question is, can I effectively service the client? Maybe. I don't, only you can answer that. But if you can't answer, if the answer is no, then maybe referring it out is a good option until you have, a good understanding of that area.
Well, when I first started, I had a lot of relationships with traders and people in the industry.
Sure.
And I remember John Mack at Morgan Stanley called me and said, I just went through the Morgan Stanley training program. And at that time, it was before they merged with Dean Witter. Sure. I was working with all Harvard, Yale, and Northwestern isn't shabby, but
not shabby.
No, but I worked 3 jobs and put myself through school. So I'm a hard worker. But I
Yeah.
was intimidated. You know, I'm a
Sure.
policeman's daughter. Just was Harvard, Yale, and they belonged to country clubs, and I just didn't think I had the pedigree. But if you know your shit, you know, no one can intimidate you. But
Yeah.
I remember I partnered with somebody, and I would bring in my relationships. We would get the listings, and I'll tell you who the person is because he also is very important in my career. Was Rick Drucker.
Sure.
And I paid him handsomely to co-list properties with me, but what he brought to me was worth everything.
Yeah.
And because I didn't think I could really, I had the relationships, but I really didn't know how to market the property. And I watched the senior brokers of the time, and I respected them. I didn't, you know, I just would watch them. I didn't necessarily call them and say, how do you do this? Or once in a while, maybe we would get together all at lunch or at committees and talk and help each other. But Rick Drucker really, and his whole family, his wife was lovely. I ended up co-listing a house with her in Northbrook, but I, for 2 years, I really shared my business with him, and he brought to me more than what that was in value. So, and I felt like I was servicing the people that I knew properly as well.
My girlfriend is an in-house leasing agent for Catalyst, which is in the West Loop. It's like
Oh, yes.
yeah, not far from us where we live.
Lucian
And
actually was supposed to design that building.
oh,
He originally. There
that is
you go again.
incredible. That
Go
is
ahead.
amazing.
Forget
Anyway,
about him. Talk
so
about me.
she no, of course you're both
No, I'm
amazing.
joking. I'm joking.
So she has her leasing license, which she only needs for her job, but she's decided after seeing brokers come through over the years, she's like, you know, I can do this. And so she's in the process of getting her broker's license, and she's trying to figure out right now, should I partner with somebody? Should I join a team? Should I go off on my own initially? Now she's never been a broker before, right? She's done leasing, but that's it. And so, you know, it's a great question that probably a lot of our listeners have who are starting out too, is what are your thoughts? You've obviously partnered with somebody who was senior. It helped you, you know, become confident in what you were offering. You were providing value as well, bringing in clients and learning the business. Has your thoughts, you know, 26 years later, do you still feel that's a great strategy, or do you see people doing it on their own? Or just curious what you're.
You know, Compass is about teams, but and a lot of companies are about teams.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily work for me. I was going to try it in January, and I felt like I was more of being a mentor and spending my time. I love my clients. I've known them
Yeah.
26 years. I'm not, you know, I love my clients, and I think they're always going to be my priority. I think there's mentorship programs out there that are fabulous, and there are people who are creating teams. I think I like the small, maybe 3 or 4 people.
Right.
You know, that's a small team, but would I want 10 people, 11 people? Well, they get great numbers at the end of the year, but I like, you know, I have repeat business, which a lot of us do. And I feel like we're all part of a family, and that's my priority. And even though I dabble in developments, I mean, my families are number one to me.
Yeah, that becomes sort of the challenge when you run a team, is now you're running a business, and some of that time is going to be spent managing those people, and it's going to take time away from your clients. And for some people that trade-off makes sense, other brokers it doesn't. And obviously for you, your relationships are so important. It makes sense, you know, why a team may or may not be something that you would.
Well, time is money, and sometimes the younger one or people, they forget that if I'm giving time, it's valuable to me. That's all we have in life is your word and time.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. I would love to talk, because I know being active and involved in the community and giving back to organizations that you're passionate about is so important to you. And I would love to talk more about how that has related. And again, you know, with the disclaimer that the reason to get involved is not to progress necessarily one's business forward, but as something I'm curious of. Yeah, obviously you are passionate about the organizations. Your husband has been involved in some of those buildings that house these organizations. But how important is it, do you think, for a real estate agent to get involved in their local community, or in
how could one not? How could one not? I mean,
Yeah.
we're selling communities, we're helping families move on. Um, I can't imagine, especially right now. I
Yeah.
mean, I walked to Starbucks and I had another realtor on the phone and I saw 4 homeless people and I gave them, I
Mm.
mean, they didn't look like they were doing drugs or alcohol, but we need to help each other out. I was so proud in our neighborhood. The Sunday after, when I was walking down Grand Avenue, I saw people with brooms, like
Yeah.
helping Jean and Giordetti's like shovel the
Yeah.
glass. And we need to help, even no matter how small it is or how large. Actually, I am now on this, the women's board of the Service Club as well, which is one of the largest organizations of charities in Chicago. And I'm very proud to be on that as well. But I can't imagine we don't give back, because when you give, you get. It's just it's my mantra in life, you know. But I don't have
Yeah.
children, so during these 3 months, I can't imagine all the working mothers or working
Yeah.
fathers. So I really applaud to the people who are parents and have children. So I never had children. So with that time that I had, I decided that that's what I was going to do with it.
Yeah. Well, you've built up this impressive, series of accomplishments, and you are, really a legend here in the Chicago market. So our listeners are always wanting to know, and there's not an easy answer to this question. So, feel free to answer it however you see fit. But what are some of the, and maybe even if it's just one thing, but what are mistakes that you've seen agents who are trying to become successful in this business, aside from not putting in the hours, right?
Faking it till you make it. Yeah,
That's
that's
it.
good.
Yeah.
Um, I thought you were going to say what is important. I think being authentic
Yeah.
is really important, and always being truthful and respectful. Don't be late for appointments. I mean, there's certain things, if you care about your clients, be there on time, know the properties, know the neighborhood, and sell that property. I don't understand this lockbox thing. I don't think I've ever had a lockbox in 26 years.
Wow.
And I try to show most of my own listings, or my partner Frank, my co-broker right now. We always show our properties. The lockbox, your value. You have to show your clients your value, and they'll appreciate it. I mean, and they do appreciate it. And if they think about the commission, I always say, don't worry about my commission. Worry what I'm going to give you at the end result. I mean, that's what's
Right.
important. And actually, since this has happened, and I was so worried. I am not the tech savvy, and you probably, if anyone, people that have been working 26 years, I mean, I think we're a little behind in that. But I can hire someone who's very tech savvy, but they can't hire 26 years.
That's
They
right.
can't buy that. You either have it or you. But you have to respect each other for what you bring to the table. So if someone's tech savvy, that brings a lot. But I'm noticing people are calling me because they realize experience does matter. Because
It sure
we're
does.
heading into a different territory. We don't know how this is all going to play out. But I've been really busy this past week, and more so than I was in February. So I think the value of their home it's more important than ever right now. And what I noticed, like with Lucian, and the first day both of us were working from home, and he's designing buildings. And he got a call he's designing 4 floors of a lawyer's office building, and right away they're thinking, are people gonna come to the office? Are we gonna have to redesign the building? And our 1-bedrooms, I mean, is everybody gonna now be selling 1-bedrooms in a den because people are gonna
Sure.
be working at
Yeah.
home? Like buildings, lots of things are gonna come out of this, and we'll just see how it changes.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens to commercial office space too. Will
Oh,
that, yeah, like what's going to happen will things really kind of go back to normal once the vaccine, everyone's inoculated, or is that more of a thing of the past? It'll be really
and how do
interesting to see.
your employees get to the office? Do they have to take
Right.
public transportation? And then, as we all know, that everything's so litigious these days. Like you
Yeah.
have to be careful if someone's. But Lucian asked his 14 or 15 architects. They had a meeting and they said, "Do you want to work from home or for the office?" And 15 of them said they want to come back to the office.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I like the office still, but I mean, there's some value of being able to, be on your sofa and read emails and things. But I really like seeing other people. I think you get energy. Energy is really important.
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out here in our own office as well, as when do we start letting agents come in using the office? And it's really something to think about, especially because it's not the same 15 people every day. We have hundreds and hundreds of agents. So we're trying to, it's like, how do we do that? And very few agents really even want to use the office, but the ones that do, it's like, okay, how do, and so we're all trying to figure that out. But I'm curious,
Well,
since, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say Compass. I have to say, I just started Compass, and then 3-4 months later, this happened. But they really have so many tools that
Yeah.
they were in the right place for this, because that you could work from home and look at Zoom. I mean, will people stop doing Zoom? I don't know. Well, it's just so many unanswered questions.
So
Forgive me.
for the last 3 months, while the pandemic's been happening and will continue to, unfortunately, probably happen for some time, how has that changed with your communication? Are you doing more Zoom meetings? Are you doing more phone calls? How has that affected your day-to-day activity, since you're not
Well,
able to get in front of clients as often?
I've been picking up the phone and calling people. I'm old school. I think
Yeah.
there's something to be said about that. I think sometimes Zoom, I mean, we didn't know, like if 4 people, their photo is in or their picture they're not on, are they insulting the others? Or I still like calling
Me
my
too.
clients, but was very helpful because this was the springtime for a lot of fundraisers, like the gala, and
Yeah.
we did a couple of them on Zoom. We were creative on how to raise money. That Zoom was very helpful for, and for us having committee meetings. But when it comes to my clients, I would pick up the phone and call them, and then they could, call me back. And I think a lot of us were a little shell shocked, and I think sometimes you can kind of, it's hard for me to fake it. So I'd rather just be on the
Yeah.
phone, because I wear my heart on my shoulders, and then sometimes
Yeah.
I wasn't in my pajamas, but I wasn't necessarily I didn't have the Matt Larcy suit look necessarily. And
So you have made a real name for yourself in the luxury market. You've done a huge accomplishments in luxury real estate. Can you talk a little bit about, how that came to be? There are agents that focus on non-luxury properties, some focus in luxury. How did that unfold for you?
I think it's because I worked at Morgan Stanley and I went to Northwestern, and when I was partnering with Rick, a lot of times I would be the one who would talk to the husbands, and he would talk to at the table, or he was good with the babies. I think that I knew my shit. And
Yeah.
I think smart people who live in those homes appreciate, and I think that they appreciate that I'm a hard worker. I remember the first time I got a listing at 209, and a very prominent Chicago family hired me, and I remember seeing them always in the front pages, and I said, why did you
Why me?
hire the policeman's daughter, and even the money manager was there, and he said, because you're the policeman's daughter.
Yeah. Well, who
And it
better to
wasn't like
trust?
that is,
Yeah.
but that isn't, it wasn't I didn't make it up to market. It's just the truth. And I think
Yeah.
if you're authentic, I think smart people and people who have luxury, they're no dummies. I mean,
No.
and you can't fake it. And, you just have to, they know who's sincere, they know, and they've done their research on you. They've made calls, and
Sure.
they called their friends, and, and I think then if someone, you sell one, then another one will call and say, Melinda was really great to work with. And I think it's, as I mentioned, when you ask some things, I think it's really important we have fun.
Yeah.
And I think people, I think people really have liked working with me. I actually make myself laugh sometimes. I think of I think humor is really important in life. It's like, to me, I want to laugh. I want to, I take my work seriously, but not myself.
Yeah.
And I think people want to work with people they like. Like when people say, I don't want to work with friends or family, I say, what, do you want to work with people you hate and, your enemies? I don't understand that one either.
Well, I think a lot of times when people say they don't want to work with friends and family, my guess is that for the majority of people who say that, it's that they're worried that they're going to make a mistake, and then that would be hurting the people closest to them, which I guess is a fair thing consider. But I always say, well, who's more likely to forgive you if you do make a mistake is friends and family. So I always think, well, maybe when people say that, they think, well, I don't really know my shit, right? Maybe
Right.
that's what they're saying. And they're saying, I don't want my friends and family to see that I don't know my shit, or I don't want to provide
No,
a lower level of service.
I would work harder for someone that I cared about. But in this market too, it's been really important for the past at least 3 years pricing. And if you're not priced appropriately, there are times when the first broker, you kind of feel sorry for it because they just have unrealistic expectations. I mean, we weren't necessarily seeing the 18-19% increases in prices that we were seeing before the recession of the last time. And if people were thinking, well, I hear everyone saying, oh, I read this, or in New York, I mean, in San Francisco, I'm like, this is Chicago. And we have a lot of money, but it's a different market. But if we can't be realistic, if we listen and tell people what they want to hear you're just like sabotaging yourself, and you're not doing it justice. But I sometimes I'll say I'll try it, and I'll say let's try it at this price. But if we don't get any showings, we know it's not priced properly, which is what I told you. You have to respect that.
Mm-hmm. And is it easier for you, 26 years in, to have conversations with sellers about pricing when the seller's expectation is not in alignment with reality?
I have a hard time not taking that listing.
Sure.
I have to say, because I think, I can go through the process. They're going to beat me up. I mean, true. You think you should be thinking about your clients, at least every one of them, once a day. Well, they're thinking about you 3 times a day. What are they doing for me to sell this property? So I think to be realistic about the market, you show them the statistics, but everybody thinks they have the best house.
Right. I know the statistics say this, but or they'll say, well, let's just try.
They say you should have people sign an agreement that after 30 days, when they say, let's try, then you need to agree to sign where I told you to list the price or walk away. But I need to do that myself. I mean, if you don't learn and keep on growing, you die. So, and I'm trying to learn the computer, and I need to grow,
Sure.
and I am. Compass has actually challenged me, and I appreciate that.
Well, they're a very tech forward
and Caldwell Banker, and they all, I mean, I could see they're all the whole platform is changing, but this is really accelerated. There was a great Inman seminar that was online. It was completely online. I was in New York in January, and even the owner of Keller Williams, who was kind of resisting, said this is disruption. This is but he also said we have to be kinder to each other as well. Let's hope we got to work on this together.
Well, it is called a cooperative commission, which is something that agents maybe sometimes forget. I was having Carrie McCormick from At Properties comes on once a month to talk about the market, and she's I'm sure you probably know Carrie. I've run into her. She's a very lovely person. She was so we were about ready to get on, and she was a little shook up, and I said, oh, is something wrong? Do you want to reschedule? She goes, no. She goes, I just can't believe how some brokers talk to me. And she goes, you just wouldn't. I wish I could record some of these conversations. She's like, some brokers just are so rude and so mean. And she is not a complainer, but she's like, she just couldn't believe it. She's like, I've been doing this 21 years and it shocks me still how some people talk, and the whole idea of working with kindness and empathy. And
well, when I first got married, a lot of people, some of my competition told people I was in Paris. Like, I retired, I'm off in the Riviera somewhere. I'm like, what? I'm at an open house. Where? In my dreams, but shame.
Yeah. It's, and also too, there seems to be, and I've talked to a lot of brokers over the years on the show who say, sometimes I come in with an offer, the broker on the other side of the deal is somebody I know very well, and we might not even be the highest offer. And sometimes that broker who really will sell that to their client because they know that I'll get the deal done and they trust me and they like me. And so
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you give a person an offer and they don't even respond to you for a couple of days. Like, shame.
Well, you said something very important earlier. I just want to go back to. You talked about doing your own showings when you have listings and not using lock boxes, and that is still an ongoing debate I hear at least here in Chicago about should you do your showing, should you not. I don't see any reason not to do a showing, but that's obviously very important to you, and I just want to make sure I reiterate that point to our listeners that you are getting paid very handsomely to sell a property, and to show up to assist the buyer's agent is probably a good move if you can do it, of course.
Well, one of my first couple of years in sales, I sold the house to Liz Fair, and Liz Fair bought the house because it didn't have a garage. It was a house in Lincoln Park and on Pine Grove. But anyway, there was a little like reading nook, and I said the previous owner used to like to read her books here, and Liz said, I bought that house because Melinda said that. Her broker was Bobby Doherty at the time. She goes, because that's where I'm going to write my music. She goes, after I bought it, I realized I have to carry my drums and my guitar because it doesn't have a garage. But I was so fixated that that's where I was going to write my music. And if I would have left the keys there, Bobby would not have thought of that, because it was the real truth. I did hear, everybody has a story, and every home has a story, and it's worth being told.
It is, and it helps the buyer feel more connected to the home, to understand, like Liz Fair, who's a musician, who needs that sort of space for you to be able to say, oh, the previous owner did, their reading here. She then can interpret that in what she needs. So I think you're absolutely right. And what a great message to the listeners.
Real estate is a noun and a verb. As for a real estate agent, we have to kind of communicate that. Relate how it feels to live in this house. And it really, when you can do that, you can see the other person kind of connecting. That's why I don't think there'll ever be realtors aren't going to disappear. People aren't necessarily, maybe they're buying homes at a certain price range without seeing a home, but the house could smell wrong. The sunshine can't be right. The karma, the energy. I mean, I've had people even, during the final walkthrough, like have energy specialists come by and say, are you sure this house is a good one for me? Or like, please.
It's funny. When I bought my first condo, which was in Uptown a million years ago, my realtor at the time, I was in a completely different profession, but my realtor said, you're just, and he was not, he was not a new agey, touchy feely kind of person, but he said, here's what's going to happen. Cause it was my first time buying a property. He said, we're going to walk through about 20 places over the next month or however we were doing it. He goes, most of them will just feel wrong the moment you walk in. And when that happens, just tell me it doesn't feel right. I mean, we can still walk through, but if it doesn't feel right, just tell me, we'll mark it off the list, because one of these places you're going to walk in and it's just going to feel right. And when it does, you have to tell me that too. And he was absolutely right. That's exactly how it worked. There's an energy to a home. Now, maybe that doesn't work that way for everyone, but he was certainly right in my case. And I walked into it wasn't even finished. They were converting it from apartments to condos. And I had a hard time even visualizing what is this going to look like. But I knew it felt right, and it ended up being the right purchase. So,
but then there are, buildings like that you have to buy on floor plans. So you don't have the opportunity, right. But if you kind of know the location and you trust the design, and unfortunately, the past since the recession, we've been seeing a lot of apartment buildings being built. Yeah. 9 Walton, and I think Helmut Jahn's building is beautiful. I hope there haven't been that many beautiful luxury buildings are built. I think in the city, it's been mostly rentals. I think now they were starting to do. I think the boutique buildings are really interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see how people are if they're gonna go to the suburbs too. We'll see.
Yeah, what is your thought on that? That's actually a really great question. Do you have? Obviously, no one has a crystal ball, but what's your instinct on that?
Well, I actually believed in that before this. I was working at 6 years on a project in Winnetka, which was beautiful, and I had half of it sold, and we worked 6 years, 36 committee meetings, and it did at the final hours, but I could see how people were attached to their country club, to their grandchildren, and they didn't want to leave the community. They weren't ready to move the city. and Lucian's designing one in Oak Brook now, which the same. I mean, people love the community, but I do see where people now are thinking if we have to bunker down, they probably would like a house maybe. And then, you know, I think once they've been, maybe a lot of people went to Lake Forest or the south suburbs where I'm from,
Sure.
and they spend some time with their family, because if you're going to be locked in, it just need more space. It's going to be interesting if buildings are going to be designed with all this common area. Are people going to want to be in those rooms together again, or in the pools, or in the big gyms and the fancy whatever they've been? I think co-ops might do well, or smaller vintage buildings again, because they're more private and less, you know.
And you have more control.
Right.
You have control about who's coming in, and
Right. I mean, we'll see. But I think, I mean, I always think the suburbs appeal to people for certain reasons. I think people like to go back to where they, you know, I'm a city girl, so, and there are people that always wanted to go back to the country club, and I think this might accelerate it a little bit.
Yeah, well, maybe. And then, but prior to the pandemic, there was, you know, there's a lot of people who retire and then want to move back into, I know my parents are from the Northwest, or they're from the North Shore really. But we grew up down in central Illinois in Peoria. But they've always thought, you know, now they wouldn't do this, but if they ever had moved back to Chicago, they would have loved to have lived in Gold Coast or somewhere around there, because
it's still
they grew
beautiful.
up in
Tell them.
Oh, they know. And they're thrilled that I live in River North, but the idea of, you know, people retire, they come back sometimes to the city. And I think that's a really cool thing too, because Chicago, we're so lucky to have the downtown we have is just,
Oh, and the lakefront. I have a listing on Astor at 1300. And when I showed the property, I actually just sat outside and said, look how beautiful this city and the street is, you know?
Yeah.
Really beautiful. I just can't wait for the farmers markets to come back and all the things that make Chicago great.
Yeah, it is. We have beautiful architecture here. We have a beautiful city, and you know, obviously,
isn't that fun? Yeah, I just found out that he has a distant relative to Goldberg, which is phenomenal.
I do.
And everybody who's been on the show always brings up architecture, which I think is really, I mean, Chicago does have beautiful. New York has, since they don't have so many because we have height restrictions and fire, New York has grown so much because it's probably easier to get a building built in New York than it is in Chicago, because we're pretty protective of, you know. But we had the foresight, like the retail families, and look, retail is disappearing. Montgomery Wards gave the Millennial Park and Grand Park to the city and said, never build this up. This will be we have a free zoo, Lincoln Park Zoo, you know?
Yeah, how lucky we are to have those things.
Very fortunate.
Yeah. Well, for anyone listening who isn't a real estate agent, but might be a buyer, a seller, who's looking to work with Melinda, somebody like yourself with all this experience, and you know, you obviously do a tremendous job for your clients. What is the best way someone should reach out to you in case they're looking to work with you?
Well, to call me, I'm still old school, 312-953-3425. If you ever see myself or my dog or Lucian, please stop by and just say hello. One thing I think that we did mention is passion, and I'm very passionate about Chicago, and I'm very passionate about real estate. Please, Melinda Jakovich-Lagrange at gmail.com. But feel free to call me, because I do pick up my phone. Lucian said, this is funny. He started his first big project since he left the SOM was the Park Hyatt.
Sure.
And the Pritzkers called him, and he said if he didn't pick up that phone, he knows they would have called Helmut Jan. So pick up the phone.
Wow, what a great final message. Pick up your phone, call, and also you said something very profound. I just want to reiterate it. You said you should be thinking about your clients at least once a day, because they're thinking about you 3 times a day, and that's a very, very strong point. So let's end with that. But Melinda, this was such a pleasure for us. We had a wonderful time chatting with you. You know, I would congratulate you on all. Thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I would congratulate you on all your success, but I'm excited just to continue to watch your success, I guess. And I will hopefully run into you walking around the neighborhood, which I tend to do a lot.
I'll buy you a drink at Erie Cafe.
Hey, I will take you up on that, because it is literally 4 steps from where I live. So I will take you up on that. But anyway, it was a pleasure. On behalf of the listeners, we want to thank Melinda for taking time out of her incredibly busy life to join us on the podcast, provide value to our listeners and our viewers. And also on behalf of Melinda and myself, we want to thank the listeners and viewers for continuing to support our show. Please follow us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/keeping it real pod. And also tell a friend. Think of one other real estate professional that could benefit from hearing this great interview with Melinda, and send them a link to the show so we can continue to support more and more agents. So Melinda, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure chatting with you.
Stay healthy.
Yes, stay and safe. Stay healthy and safe.
Healthy and safe. And be kind.
And yes, be kind. Thank you so much.
Okay. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
Bye.